And welcome in. Here we go. It's On the Ledge. No, it's not. Here we go. It's Now and Next, and we've got our cast in the house tonight. It's the comms and strategy team. Lots to talk about. They drop in on us every couple of weeks. Bob Reid is here, and Marie Aikens is here. Lindsay Broadhead is here. And I just want to say, from a comms perspective, it occurred to me this week that they killed Wyerton Willie because he got his comms wrong on the prediction. I mean, right? Look, we're in the middle of freaking winter all over again.
This is the risk of our industry, Dave. It's,
they take it seriously up there in Wyerton,
Don't mess around.
It's just insane. And if only it weren't so serious, it would be funny in terms of some of the stories that we're going to follow today. I want to get to what is a war, what is not a war. We'll get to that. Presently, want to talk about the Prime Minister's curious answer around the attack on Canadian soldiers in Kuwait. But Bob, you brought a really interesting piece to the table this week, and I was fascinated by it, only because I think AI is probably in every other conversation that we're having. And it was interesting to see the piece from the American Medical Association talking about how doctors now, in the States anyway, and I expect to some degree here in Canada, are beginning to feel not just comfortable, but necessarily prescribed, if you want, to use AI in their work. And they're finding ways of making sure that it not only makes their time more valuable, but it actually makes their work more valuable in terms of diagnostics and all those sorts of things. It wasn't so long ago that they were really pushing back on that fairly strenuously.
And the release that they put out, and it caught my eye because it was a communications play. They proactively put out a release updating their survey data. They've been tracking doctors, the American Medical Association has in the U.S., on their adoption rates of AI. And they've more than doubled, like in the last year. Like there is a sharp uptake going on, and they're quoting different doctors, specialists about how they're using it and how it's helping them do their work, make their time more efficient. Not that they're relying on it to do the job for them necessarily, but like anything else, they're using it like a tool, and they're finding ways to use it, particularly on what they call the grunt work of writing up and producing reports after they have a meeting with a patient or a consultation. And here's the summary of what I've found, what we talked about, all of those kinds of things. And it's funny, anecdotally, I'm hearing this from people just in my own circle. One friend of mine referees hockey, and he says, I use it all the time because I have to provide a report after each game about things that went down during the course of the game, and if there were calls I made or anything like that. He said, it's a pain in the ass to have to do it. This thing spits it out like that. So I thought it was pretty clever of the American Medical Association to mine their own data and to say this is what's happening. And it's actually a positive thing, folks. Mm-hmm. You should understand that this is a good thing, because you're right. AI is in every other conversation, but for the most part, we, speaking for myself, don't really understand a ton about it. And it can be really scary or just really annoying. Oh, yeah, that's the stuff that makes all those fake videos that are flying around the internet and popping up in my social feed. Or this is the thing that's going to kill us all someday. I try and be more optimistic about it. It's a technological breakthrough. It is already changing the world around us. It will really change us. The way we work, the way we interact, the way we use information, the way we use technology in the very near future. And I try and look at it like splitting the atom. Yeah, that paved the way for the nuclear bomb, but it also gave us nuclear powered electricity and medical isotopes and a whole bunch of things that are beneficial. So I, for one, welcome our neural net overlords with open arms. But I'm trying to be optimistic that there'll be some good coming out of this as well.
Well, Lindsay, and as Bob says, from a communications perspective, it's interesting to see how this is played out, and I suspect it's targeted at three audiences. One is the media, just because we in the media have short-term attention span, and we're not really good at reporting on science or medical stories anyway. So tell me as much as you can so I can be prepared to report on it. The second one is just the general audience, being the patients, the users of the medical services. But on the other hand, I still got the feeling in this that they were trying to say to the doctors who weren't quite prescribed to it yet, it's okay. Others around you are doing this, and we're developing best practices. So there was a three-prong approach here, and I thought it was a pretty interesting way to kind of make the point in what can be, a fairly complicated environment when you're trying to talk about how do you apply AI.
Yeah, well, and I think we also have to remember this is the AMA, right? These are American-based audiences, and what are they hearing about right now? They're hearing about a kind of an intellectual war that's happening between Silicon Valley and the White House as it relates to AI. So I think, trust also plays a huge role in this by saying there is a way to use AI, and let's not dismiss it outright. There's a path, and a very reasonable path. I was kind of struck by how dumbed down that press release was. Insofar as, like Bob said, and I wrote it here just so I made sure I got the terms right. They call it medical research summation and clinical care documentation. Like, you can't get much more boring than that. It's admin, ostensibly. So when we think of the scary parts of AI, and I have a friend who works in the space, and she schooled me in the term agentic AI and what that means. And that's when it has, the root word is agency, right? It has its ability to act in an autonomous way and make decisions without human input all the time. The kind of AI that AMA is talking about right now is, very, request, spit back info, request, spit back info. So it's safe. So I think you're right. It's, hey, doctors who are a little suspicious and are getting inundated by fear factor in the news right now, cool your jets. It's okay. There's a real safe space for you to do this, and you're also going to improve your billings.
And just to be clear, it's AMA is the American Medical Association, not Marie Aikens. I just wanted to make that that clear to everybody that this was not generated by Anne-Marie. The interesting note, sort of a subtext in this, though, Anne-Marie, was we like it because we know how to use it. We would caution patients from using AI to interpret a radiology report or some kind of return from a doctor. Now, I'll tell you, I know people in my world who have done that. They've got a really complicated answer back on a diagnosis from their specialist, and they put it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT spits it out, and it summarizes, dumbs it down. But I think the implication here is there's some nuance in these reports that you got to be careful of that the AI wouldn't pick up on.
Yeah. I think two things I thought about with this story, and it was probably a bad day to use my initials when we're talking about an AME story. Was the first thing was, I think this was in a proactive and a good job at it, proactively heading off the notion, especially in the U.S., that AI will replace medical healthcare workers, and they need less funding because of AI, eliminates jobs and blah, blah, blah. I think they did a good job at communicating that proactively, how they're using AI as a tool to help them be more efficient in their jobs rather than replacing any healthcare workers. The other thing I think of when I think of healthcare and AI is it's never, ever been as high right now. As we call it health anxiety now. Since the pandemic, health anxiety has just escalated, continues to escalate. We used to call it hypochondriasm. And I think that maybe is a tool that maybe labels people in a way that a lot of people aren't comfortable with. But health anxiety, thanks to the pandemic we've all lived through, is really high right now. And AI is exacerbating that tremendously, because people that are worried, their anxiety is focused on their health and their kids' health and everyone else's health. are constantly using AI to figure out what's this, and you do get these very complicated answers back and diagnoses and potentials, and it's sending people to ERs. It's sending people. It's some people will call 911 as a result of it. So there's a lot of things happening connected to health and AI, and I hope that our big associations like AMA and the equivalent in Canada, the CMA, will deal with those kinds of things on how do we teach patients about using AI as well. It's a tool for doctors and physicians and nurses and healthcare practitioners, but it's also a tool for patients that can be useful, but it also can be just increasing their health anxiety and sending them for healthcare services that are not necessary.
Yeah, it's the next generation of Dr. Google, and that was a big concern. What I find interesting, though, I think recently, Lindsay, just talking generally about the AI tools that most of us do use, and they are the ones that you've cited. That is to say, you prompt it and it gives you back an answer or some kind of solution. And will that replace jobs, et cetera? And it was an interesting take to suggest that the AI tools right now, while they seem to be leading edge startups, big tech, they really are going to what amounts to a cell phone in our lives, in as much as they will be a commodity. You will not be able to distinguish between one or the other. It's just going to be the level of service you get, or to draw the analogy to the phone, the bandwidth, the bells and whistles on the apps that you can put on the phone. It's going to be eventually seen more as a tool to actually help you through your day, as opposed to something that is going to change your life.
I have to, plead the fifth on this one. I just don't know. The more I read or try to understand about AI, it almost depends what rabbit hole I go down, right? There's very, it's like a Venn diagram. There's a circle that's very reasonable and considered, and seems sensible, and it pours water on the fear factor, because it references all the other industrial revolution or information agriculture, all the revolutions that we've been through, right? This is just part of it. But then there's that other circle of the Venn diagram that we're seeing a lot of it play out now, in the way war is changing, the way the military is being commanded and controlled in a very different way, the way mental health is playing out, and people engage with the tool, and how people get information, and actually it manipulates action, because there's so many human characteristics to it. So I would love to fall on the side of optimism, but I am going to plead the fifth, because the trajectories are so unruled and unruly, and unlike the other um, technological changes that we've seen in the past, this one just seems completely unfettered by regulation. And things are happening at a pace that far outstrips any ability of any government to regulate it or mandate it. And the other big difference is the amount of money that sits in the controlling companies is completely disproportionate to any ability to control it. I don't think anything like this on a like-for-like basis has happened in the past in the same way. It's not a scientific thing that was found, like the, around nuclear energy. It's been manipulated in a different way. So I don't know. How's that for kind of that's my non-answer answer, but I'm not as optimistic that humans are going to do great things with it.
Well, you're right. There's lots of examples where we're not. And Bob, to the point around the war, for example, in the Middle East right now, governments, rather than regulating, are leaning in to the manipulative capabilities, because we're seeing out of the White House, we are seeing videos of what's going on in the war mixed in with video games and all kinds of what amounts to, artificial images that are not expressing what's going on over there. Iran is masterful at using AI and social media combined to get that message out. I mean, there was a whole reel showing a bunch of U.S. forces that had been captured by Iranian soldiers and troops, and none of which was true. But again, being able to use that, you think about the propaganda of the old days where they just drop leaflets from the airplane. This manipulative element of AI looks so real, sounds so real, is immediate, is accessible, is become a war tool for the folks involved in these situations.
Well, the old adage remains true that the first casualty of war is the truth. And we're seeing it playing out in real time with this latest way of mounting and executing a propaganda war. And I've made the point on this podcast before that I never thought I would see the day when I literally can't believe my own eyes. And now it happens to me multiple times a day where something will pop up online and I'll look at it and go, I have no idea if that's real or not. I don't know. I've got to do more research. I've got to look into this. I've got to try and find the truth about this, because I can't just look at it and say, wow, look what just happened, because odds are it probably didn't. That's the scary reality that we live in now.
Yeah. Well, I heard somebody the other day also in that vein, Anne-Marie, say, the way to look at this, if you're in your whatever social media platform, is go into the comments and check out the comments, and you'll see, Dog Lady 335 with 6 followers had this long-winded whatever to say about it. And of course, it's a bot that's responding to it. But it's creating through the AI.
That's my handle, Dave.
Oh, jeez, we just outed her.
Just so we're all clear.
Well, 3 of your followers are in the room.
There you go. I'm amazed I have that many.
But the idea that those comments might be outrageous, but they actually inform the algorithm that somehow reflects you as a follower of the person who made the post. So it really gets insidious in terms of the implications and the manipulation here.
Oh, it's very true, and it is very difficult to believe what you hear or see. But Bob, I thought you were referring to what Trump says. That I have to, I actually have a default now. I don't believe anything he says. He actually, I don't think even knows what he's talking about half the time, and is confused. At one point, talking about this war, he started referring to October 7th. These are bad people. We had to do something about them because of October 7th. That's how confused he is. And so you can't believe anything that their leaders are saying. And you also can't believe anything that you're seeing or reading on social media. So it is really difficult. And it's it makes it's a very anxiety provoking state, because when the world is at such a critical point, if you can't believe what you see, read, hear, if you have to doubt everything, it really does make you feel like there's nothing I can do to really figure out the truth other than digging behind, as Dave said. I normally don't tell people ever to read the comments, but it sometimes will give you a clue, as you said, Dave, as whether or not this is a bot, it's an AI-generated image, if it's truthful in any way. I do a lot of going off of an app and checking another source to validate information. It's all kinds of ways. And if I do generate answers to a question I have through using one of the AI tools, I will validate that as well. But I'm not sure we're really teaching people about that kind of literacy, young people who are using it. Who's doing that? I'm not sure.
Well, I got news for you. I got to teach my mom, because she's relying on it now. She just realized she puts a question into her browser. The Google AI kicks out the answer for it. I mean, it's not like you're getting a list of websites anymore. And mom looks at it and says, okay, well, that must be true. But there are points where it's not really true, or it's not really complete, even at
exactly.
that.
Yeah. So it's
the literacy level is really important.
And I hope that the federal government, but I think they're slow starting this with have a minister that's appointed to it. You think they would make that as one of our priorities, because I don't think they're teaching it in school. So our kids that are adopting these tools, or at least even if they're not adopting the tool, but they're seeing the results of the tool,
Not to be facetious, but who would teach us that?
Well, you're going to have to define that very carefully.
The lineup of robots behind me here that are gonna be ready to go. I know we're gonna be pressed for time because you've got a hard stop, Lindsay. So I want to come back to the war, but vis-a-vis what's going on in the Middle East and Washington. But I thought it was an interesting conversation that popped up late last week when we discovered that a base where the Canadians were based in Kuwait was attacked. And we didn't find out about it for about a week or so. And then it came up in a scrum with the Prime Minister. And his handling of the question, I thought, was rather questionable.
If you can confirm in English if this attack happened, and why you didn't inform Canadian before?
Well, I mean, I'm not the only spokesperson for the government, but I'll just confirm that Canadian forces are, the members of the Canadian forces are all safe and sound. I reinforce, as I said in French, what you know, which is that we are not engaged in these actions of the U.S. and Israel. We're not engaged in offensive actions, and we will not be engaged in those actions.
So the headline said the PM confirms Canadian Armed Forces were attacked in Kuwait. I didn't hear that in the answer. In fact, I heard just a lot of, uncertainty at best, to be polite, in his answer. I just don't understand how he couldn't have had a handle on that question, knowing full well this has been sitting on the table or the back burner, as you will, for about a week.
And I don't know how to answer your question. I have to admit, I'm going to plead the fifth again. That's going to be my whole, my position here on the podcast. But what does matter is that Carney's space right now and his brand that I think is very rooted and strong and can get stronger, but people are starting to chip away at it. And it's through many fumbles like this, because where he exceeds any of the Canadian competition, as it were, but I think any of our global leaders that we're seeing at all, is that there is a return backness to the kind of a leader of another era, or perhaps it's a future-looking leader, I'm not sure, but it's something that's recognizable. It's something that is trustworthy. There's confidence in them and in him specifically. Part of that is articulating the consequences of war in a very direct, meaningful way. And certainly any Canadian, be it civilians or those who may be fighting along other countries, although I think he just said that is not the case. The point is we should have complete clarity around this, and we don't. Mm-hmm. So for his brand to retain its strength and fortitude, he's going to have to not just be on the game, but ahead of the game every time, so that no one can ever chip away at this from the edges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, there was the problem, Bob, began because we were finding out delayed time in terms of when this attack happened, that there were Canadians involved. That to me was the question, and then kind of, glibly saying, well, I'm not the only spokesperson for the government. I mean, really? Yeah. You're the Prime Minister. So it created a problem for himself that wasn't there.
Yeah, that response was appalling. I'm not the only spokesperson for the government. I mean, you are the head of the government, period, full stop. And you are the same guy who, when a tragedy or a natural disaster happens somewhere, you get a statement out promptly, responding to it and expressing concern and the support of Canadians. He's good at doing those things, but he seems to be really bad at the war-related stuff. His first comments when this war was initiated, and obviously not by us, not with any consultation, but his first comments were slow in coming and then clear as mud. It started off as, we're supportive of the action that's been taken. And then we regret that this action was taken, yet we're still supportive of it. He was all over the map on that one. And in this one, it should have been the first thing out of his mouth at his first availability after he was informed about it, as he has rightly and so often done, and other leaders do this as well. I know we're here to talk about this morning, but before we get to that, I want to address the situation that happened here. In this case, I want to address the situation involving Canadian Forces personnel in Kuwait. Here's what we know. Here's the latest. Here's our point of view on the whole thing. It's fundamental, simple stuff that he doesn't seem to have a good handle on. Anything that's coming at us sideways, albeit with respect to this war in the Middle East, he's not good at it.
Well, to complicate matters, they had the take note debate last Monday on the war in Iran, Marie, and they knew then. And then nobody thought in the course of that debate for the defense minister at least to stand up and say, by the way, to Bob's point, this is what's gone on. We want to update the nation on these things. The whole comms around this, it's not just the PM. Surely they are taking their lead from the PMO, but boy, defense and foreign affairs, they don't seem to be on the same page here.
Yeah, I think you're all very right that in its, and you're right too, Lindsay, because we don't have clarity. And what happens when you're not proactive in putting out the bad news is people start to speculate and guess, and sources come out, and you'll have differing viewpoints. And I have heard kind of different stories about what actually happened. And, was it a purposeful attack? Was it an accidental attack? Was it, I think it was some reports I've heard, it wasn't actually at the base. It was just near the base, that kind of thing. And that's what happens in the midst of proactive, transparent communications. And that requires, those decisions are usually through your communication advisors. This happened. They would have gotten a report pretty instantly to say, this is what happened, and this is how we should handle it. And I would see, especially if it was just, it was near the base, it wasn't a purposeful attack on Canadians, no one was hurt. That's good information to get out there so people aren't speculating, were we attacked? Were people hurt? Were people killed? What are we going to do about that? And I think what are we going to do about it was probably what was preventing them from being honest about it, because we've taken this position that we're not being proactive, we're not getting involved. And I think that could have been addressed in the facts of what happened. And the Prime Minister should have been better prepared by his communication advisors. So, because he looked like he was pivoting on his feet, and that shouldn't happen.
Well, if we were south of the border, Lindsay, we may well be accused of being unpatriotic. So Pete Hegseth, he had his own little headline webinar this week for the media, letting them know what he expects of those who are reporting on the war.
People look up at the TV and they see banners, they see headlines. I used to be in that business, and I know that everything is written intentionally. For example, a banner or a headline, Mideast war intensifies, splashing on the screen the last couple of days, alongside visuals of civilian or energy targets that Iran has hit, because that's what they do. What should the banner read instead? How about Iran increasingly desperate? Because they are. They know it, and so do you, if it can be admitted. Or more fake news from CNN. Reports that the Trump administration underestimated the Iran war's impact on the Strait of Hormuz. Patently ridiculous, of course. For decades, Iran has threatened shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. This is always what they do, hold the strait hostage. CNN doesn't think we thought of that. It's a fundamentally unserious report. The sooner David Ellison takes over that network, the better. Another example of a fake headline that I saw yesterday. War widening. Here's a real headline for you for an actual patriotic press. How about Iran shrinking, going underground? You see, Iran's leaders are hiding in bunkers and moving into civilian areas. The only thing that is widening is our advantage.
We need a patriotic press, Lindsay. And I've heard this from more than one saying, and not just the extremes like Hegseth. They're saying you may not be agreeing with Trump, but we got to get behind the effort to defeat Iran now that we're in there, and the media plays a role in that.
I think that is the clip of this administration. I am semi-obsessed. And I like, honestly, I hope someone writes their doctoral thesis on this. What is patriotism at all? Like, it's a very American term. It's, but it always gives you a sense of like baseball and popcorn and carrying the flag and community neighborhoods in the suburbs and sticking up for your brothers and sisters and kind of arm over arm. He's talking about the manipulation of media. And it's fascinating on many levels because, first of all, he's talking to mainstream media. This is the government who spends tens of millions, if not north of that, on social media ads, manipulation of social media ads, everything outside of the mainstream, and in fact has dismissed the mainstream. He's now teaching the mainstream for which he came from. Fox News is still the mainstream, how to do it right. And I'm left with is a bunch of questions, right? Like, is this patriotism? Is it jingoism? Is it propagandaism? What is he actually asking? And increasingly so, like I think they reported this week that 60,000 Washington Post readers have left, and they're kind of voting with their feet. How is this going to trickle up to dear old Canada, right? Because we're seeing it in corners and communities and our own media and our own politics across the board. Plus, I have to be honest, like I'm not innocent of this. When I read a really unpatriotic piece about Canada, I kind of get squirmy. Like I want us to have that more Canadian, let's mount together. And so I'm almost I'm part of this, right? Because I want to consume something that appeals to that patriotism that I feel. So, it's a fascinating thing, and this is only just beginning. Plus, Pete, he is an SNL character of the greatest quality. I could watch him all day long. He's wonderful. But I hope we talk about this again and again and again, because I think there's a lot here.
Well, to your point around how you respond to a piece that's not seemingly patriotic to Canada, I would suggest that more often than not, that would be an opinion piece. We're not talking about opinion pieces here. We're talking about reporting on the facts of the war, what's going on the ground. And Anne-Marie has a remark about, well, I can't wait for the Ellisons to take control of CNN. It's going to be the best thing ever. That will be the worst thing ever. That would be the most dangerous thing that's going to happen in the United States is what's going to happen to their media structure because the Ellisons are so heavily ingrained in that, and they are the mega billionaire clan. CBS, CNN, so to go down that road and suggest somehow that is what America needs is just really disturbing.
Yeah, it is really disturbing. And I watched him, as Lindsay said, school the media, the media that they don't court, that they don't allow interviews often for, that they call out. The president calls them out, calls them names, and is really offensive to them and doesn't answer the questions. And then issues releases through Truth Social, like that's where official statements from the White House, and the White House's accounts have been turned into meme generators that are offensive as well. So it's but it is, again, as Lindsay says, seeping into Canada. I've heard politicians here use things like fake news that isn't unheard of up here. And it's becoming more and more common that happens. And if it's fake news is basically not anything you don't agree with, that you don't believe that headline is emphasize the right information. But the way he is telling media to change their headlines is actually is inaccurate as well. Some of his, Iran going underground. How would that? Other than giving this sense of, I don't think it's patriotism. I think, we've got those monsters on the run kind of thing. That's what I think he wants to instill, as opposed to we love the U.S. so much.
Well, here's the problem that a step further, Bob, and that is based on that and the fake news headlines. And Brendan Carr steps in. He's the head of the FCC, which regulates the broadcasters in the United States. And so he says anybody out there right now who doesn't stop broadcasting these fake headlines risks their license. Yeah. And they were citing the story that the Wall Street Journal had that said that 5 American tankers were attacked by Iraq, and the tankers were in Saudi Arabia. The president immediately got online and ranted and said this wasn't true. They weren't damaged. They weren't destroyed, everything else. Reuters reported on that, and everybody else did. But here's what's the problem. Everybody's reporting on what the Wall Street Journal is saying. So there's all kinds of accounts of what the Wall Street Journal has said. There are suggestions by reporters on the Hill in the United States saying, well, it's okay. He can rant against the Wall Street Journal if they got the story wrong, and they did. Well, I spent about 3 hours today trying to find any indication that the story was wrong. I can't find one, first. But second, we've got, whether it's wrong or not, everybody else is reporting on what the Wall Street Journal is reporting. There's no independent reporting going on here. There was no fact check to go in and say, did this actually happen? So one is as bad as the other.
Yeah, it's a confluence of the sad state of journalism, just driven by the economics of being in the news media business. And this is not new. This has been at play for a decade plus already. So you've got that unraveling and deteriorating. To your point about there wasn't decent fact checking on this, people grabbed that story and ran with it. You've got an administration that is obsessed with discrediting further legitimate media sources, and doing everything it can to try and command and control the narrative that's out there. And Hegseth made that abundantly clear what he wanted to see. And to me, when I take a bit more of a step back, I find it sadly consistent with everything that this administration is about. Because what would make Hegseth really happy? Old-fashioned newsreels, right?
Yeah.
World War II. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea. Flash. Our boys have done it again, fighting the Hun or whatever. Yep. Like, that's the kind of thing that he's longing for, and that comes from the top down. And that whole administration is possessed with Norman Rockwell's America. If we could just get back to that, if we had nice factories in every town that everybody worked at and white picket fence houses to go home at the end of the day, and none of these foreigners like we got now because we're going to deport them all and get rid of them. Like, that's the mindset. That's the mentality that permeates right across. And this is consistent with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's leave it there because Lindsay wants to march off to March break. So we don't want to get in the way of that because, that's the ritual. So we'll leave it there. But when we do come back and gather again, I will want to ask you guys about how you would stick handle the comm strategy in the Premier's office around his need and call to change the Freedom of Information Act. So noodle that for a little while and let that play out, because I think this is going to be interesting. I got the over and under as to whether or not it's going to be the first question period next week when the House comes back, but we'll see. All right, we'll leave it there.
Marie Aikens to answer that question first.
I'm ready.
Not to pose the question? That's it. Thanks to Bob Reid. Marie Aikens is here. Lindsay Broadhead. I'm Dave Trafford, and this is Now and Next. Have a great week.